Nutrition. I'm Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian nutritionist. And today we are less nap time nutrition and more nap time astronomy with special guest, Dr. Jeff Hester, formerly of ASU. And he was my astronomy professor. And I was a little bit starstruck when I came into class. And he showed this picture, which a lot of you might be familiar with, the gaseous columns in the Eagle Nebula. And he actually took that picture on Hubble. So thank you so much, Dr. Hester, for joining me today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. You were fun to have in class, and I'm sure we'll enjoy the conversation today too.
Yeah, well, I think so. We always had fun.
I wouldn't. Yeah, right. Actually, you came along the class camp out that we took. You came along on, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh, I was instrumental in developing that. Yeah.
Okay, that's right.
Me and Marcia.
Right. Back in the day.
We planned a class camp out, and that was awesome time. Really good.
Clearly, this needs to be offline conversation. So.
So today, our official conversation is talking about Mercury retrograde and what is it and what it means for you. So let's talk about the actual astronomy of it. Is Mercury actually going backwards in its orbit?
No, Mercury doesn't go backwards. The planets move around the sun under the influence of the sun's gravity, following orbits that are very accurately calculated. But sometimes it looks like it's going backwards. I mean, a way that you can think about it, Mercury moves in its orbit more rapidly than the Earth does, which means that Mercury catches up with Earth about once every, I think it's 116 days or something like that. But from our perspective, when we look at the relative motion, it's a little bit like, imagine that you were driving down the road in your car, you're driving kind of slow, and there's a kid standing out in her front yard with a ball on a string, spinning it over her head. If you watch that ball, there would be some times that it looked like the ball was moving in the same direction that you are, and there would be some times that it looked like the ball was moving in the opposite direction. Ironically, it turns out that when the ball is moving in the opposite direction of what you are, that's what we would call prograde motion. And when the ball looks like it's moving in the same direction that you are, that's what we would call retrograde motion. But anyway, it's nothing but a matter of looking at something that is moving from a platform that is itself moving.
Okay, so I have this very very scientific screenshot here.
Oh, okay.
Can you see that one now?
I can see that one now, yeah.
Very scientific explanation where Mercury is punching the other planets. So that's exactly what you described.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so every semester, and I had your class a couple times just because I loved it so much, and it fit in so well with nutrition. So every semester on the first day of class, one of the first things you would say is, this is astronomy, it's not astrology. Right. And if anyone is here to talk about Scorpio rising, this is not the right place. Maybe the corner coffee shop would be a better idea. And at that point, we lost a good amount of all semesters. Every time you made that speech, we lost people.
Right. Exactly.
Because there is a difference between astronomy and astrology. So what you just described was astronomy. So why don't you tell us what the difference is?
Well, okay. I mean, I'm an astrophysicist. I take physics, what we understand of the way that the world really works, and apply it to understanding the universe of which we are a part. Astrology is a hangover from back in the day when people didn't really have any good understanding of rocket scientists. I love it. People really didn't understand any of this stuff. And so they looked at the sky. The sky was awesome. It was amazing. The regular motions of the planets were one of the first really clear, clean patterns in nature that people could look at and say, maybe there's order out there. And so, not surprisingly, the human brain is, for lots of fascinating reasons that we could talk about, the human brain tends to see agency in things. It tends to see meaning in things. It tends to see purpose in things. even when none of that is actually there. And so it's not too surprising that people looked up and they saw it and said, wow, I don't understand what that is, so I'm going to make up some stories. And once you make up stories like that are hard to get rid of. So that's kind of where astrology came from. And there are various ways you can approach it. I mean, one thing you can do is you could say, okay, how much of an influence does Mercury have on me? Calculate Mercury's gravitational pull on you. I just did that a few minutes ago, so I'd have a number to toss out here. I think that Mercury's gravitational pull on you is something like 1/10 billionth the gravitational pull of Earth. I mean, it's not big. Okay, so there's some kind of woo-woo out there that connects Mercury to us. There are ways you can test that. And it's really kind of fun. This has been done many times, much to the chagrin of astrologers, where you take a bunch of different astrologers and hand them all of the birth information for different people. And you say, okay, go and cast their charts and do all of this kind of stuff. And they all come back and they say, oh, well, Mercury's retrograde or yada, 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 and therefore this person should da, 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 da. First thing you notice is all of them will give you a completely different answer. And so if there's anything to it, you would hope that at least they could kind of get their act together. The other thing is that if you look at what they say and then compare that with what actually happens, every now and then they get it right, just exactly as often as you imagine that they would by complete random chance. And so the idea of the stars and the planets and all of that affecting your life in some woo-woo way is just not real. Turns out my saying that is, for a lot of people, is just going to make them believe in it all that much more strongly. It's a true statement. The way that our brains work, we crave certainty about things like this. And there's actually a thing that psychologists call the backfire effect. There's a neat book called Uncertainty, Being Wrong When You Think You're Right, or something like that, by Robert Burton. Anyway, your brain so craves being right that when presented with evidence that you're wrong, quite often what your brain does is just latch on to the belief all the more strongly. And so, yeah, me sitting here as a scientist and talking about this kind of stuff, there are going to be people who are going to say, he's just one of those, and then go off to the coffee shop and talk about how sure they are that their horoscope got it right the other day. There is one way that it can affect you, though. And the way that it can affect you is that if you do truly believe that Mercury being in retrograde has some effect on you, causes you to have a different life or experience things differently or act differently or whatever, then that expectation will affect the way that you act and the way that you respond and the things that you do, which will in fact have an effect on your life.
So you're making mental room for it allows room for it to be true.
No, well, it's not so much that you making mental room for it allows it. It's that because you decide that it's true, that changes your actions in a way that wind up comporting with your expectations. And so, it's one of those things where if you don't tell somebody who believes in this stuff that Mercury's in retrograde, Mercury could be in full up retrograde, and you go and tell somebody, hey, aren't you so glad that Mercury's not in retrograde today because it means that we can all have great days? They're probably going to go out and have a great day until somebody points out that really Mercury was in retrograde, and then they're going to get mad because they didn't realize what a lousy day they were having. Anyway.
See, and my joke in my house is that Mercury has been in retrograde for the past 5 years, which is exactly how old my twins are.
I understand. I do understand. we have 3 grown daughters. You don't know this. We actually just adopted our now 9-year-old grandniece.
Oh,
So we
wow.
are back in the young one around the house game.
Wow.
So I am more there with you than you might have imagined I would be.
I didn't imagine that. So Mercury retrograde, if you do buy into the astrology side of it, it's supposed to be a time when you're not supposed to make rash decisions. You're supposed to be a little introspective. You're supposed to take time and think things through a little bit more. And of course, you can get into if Mercury is retrograde in Scorpio versus Gemini, what that means, and it gets very in depth. But either way,
what that means is whether you go to the beach or to the ski slopes on your birthday. That's what that means.
well, and that's a really difficult decision to make if
It
the stars want to
is,
make that
yes,
decision.
right.
If I would love to have that decision to make, honestly. So I want to show this quickly. We just got out of Mercury retrograde,
Okay.
and
All
here
right.
we are. Mercury is finally out of retrograde, so now everything is your own fault again. And I think that's where I live, really.
Yeah.
But it's so really, isn't it always a good time to take a moment and be introspective?
It is always a good time to take, not to spend every waking moment being introspective, but to take time to be introspective. I mean, what I'm doing these days, I actually took early retirement from ASU a few years ago, and one of the things that I am doing these days is I'm a professional coach. I work with executives, professionals, a wide range of people, kind of doing introspection of a sort. I think you can probably count the number of people with my background who are doing what I am now doing on one hand, and you won't need 4 of your fingers. It seems like quite a jump from an astrophysicist who worked on Hubble and all of that stuff to somebody who is now doing things like coaching and speaking, and I do some consulting as well. But it actually turns out it's a very good use of that skill set, because professionally, what I always did was try to look at ideas in a creative way and then, challenge them, test assumptions, try out different ideas, look for ways of thinking about it that people had not looked at it before. And so in a coaching context, that comes across really very well to talk to somebody, ask questions, understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish, or what things might be holding them back, or what resources that they might have at their disposal that they're not having, and then just kind of work in thinking mode, or in thinking partner mode, and help them find new possibilities, help them take vague ideas and turn them into real plans, help them make sure that the things that they're doing are really in alignment with where their own values and interests are. It's not at all uncommon to talk to somebody who's struggling with the difference between the things that they really care about and the things that they think they're supposed to care about. And it's kind of amazing. I mean, it really is. It is kind of amazing how much someone can change their lives simply by making that transition from saying, I'm going to start trying to be who I'm supposed to be, and instead I'm going to start working on being who I truly and legitimately am. It's great fun working with people, seeing them make those kinds of transitions in their lives and in their careers, and even in their businesses, is just really very rewarding. So I'm having a lot of fun. I am thoroughly enjoying what I'm doing.
Well, I'm sure ASU really lost a great professor when you left, but I'm glad you're following your own passion.
I once worked for a guy, a really clever guy, a fellow by the name of Jim Westfall, who was the principal investigator on the camera that flew on Hubble. And one of his favorite sayings was that if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And yeah, I'm having fun. I actually left ASU following a conversation with a colleague who told me that a different colleague of ours had recently died, and I guess this guy had been literally sitting there at his desk, the same desk he had been sitting at for 50 years or something like that, and he had a heart attack and face planted on his keyboard. And I said, "That's awful." And, a colleague that was telling me about this said, "What was so awful about it? He had a paycheck, he had health insurance. What was the big deal?" And I kind of thought, if I'm not careful, I am on a path where someday I'm going to be sitting in the same office that I have been sitting in for decades, and I'm going to have a heart attack and faceplant on my keyboard, and there will have been a lot of things that I didn't do that I would like to do that really are expressions of who I am. One thing led to another, and here I sit.
Wow. Well, given that most of my audience is parents, looking for nutrition advice, and I've kind of gone astray the entire time today, and I know I'm coming at this. I didn't prep you for this question, but if there is something that you could give over to some parents who feel like maybe they're pursuing the wrong goals, or they're not living true to who they are.
My.
What's that? Like, do you have anything small to just?
Okay, you're talking to somebody again who has 3 grown daughters, a 9-year-old daughter at home, and 4 grandkids. And his wife is an elementary school principal. So we talk about this stuff a lot. So you have to be careful, because you may have just put a quarter in a very long play slot here.
Oh no.
My very quick response is that, first of all, you're going to do things that screw up your kids, and so don't fret about it. We all do. Your kids can live through that just fine. But the more serious side of that is that to grow, kids need space, and they need freedom, and they need to make mistakes, and they need to deal with risk, and they need to face the consequences of that risk. Because when you get to be adults, you're out there in the world, and you have to deal with all of that stuff. And where you learn to deal with all of that stuff is when you're a kid, and you're having to deal with all of that stuff at a time when the stakes are low enough that you can learn how. And so if I were to give one piece of advice, it would be, don't be a helicopter parent. Just don't do it. There's nothing worse that you could do for your kids than deprive them of the opportunity and getting in trouble and having to face consequences.
I think that is a very good point. And I recently read an article about bulldozer parents, which take.
Yes.
You saw that?
I saw that. There's actually, in fact, just today, I've not read it yet, but I have bought it. I think it was just today that it was released, a new book titled something like The Coddling of the American Mind, or something along those lines, that talks about the phenomena of helicopter parenting and what the costs of that are, at levels ranging from, practical implications to what's going on in the brain. So yeah, if you're going to recommend something for people to go look at, that might be a fun book to read. I don't know.
Yeah, I find that having twins, I never had the opportunity to be a helicopter, because helicopters generally only fly one direction.
How old are your kids again?
My twins just turned 5.
Oh my!
And the baby's almost 2.
And the baby is almost 2. You had twins, and then you went ahead and had a third.
Well, see, here's the thing. I know you're not big into the whole foo-foo stuff, but the reason I have to believe in God is because someone has to be laughing at me. Oh. If there's no one laughing at me, then it's all pointless, right?
Somewhere my mother, I was a late in life kid. My mother was 42, 43 when I was born. And growing up, she'd just always say, I hope that when you're 42 years old, you have a kid. And so I just turned 60, and we just adopted a 9-year-old. So somewhere my mother is having an absolute belly laugh.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh,
Well, I figure we exhausted the official conversation here.
okay.
So
All right.
I'm going to close
All
off
right.
the live broadcast. But thank you so much for joining me today, and it was fun seeing you again. And we should definitely catch up.
It was a pleasure, and we definitely should catch up. Maybe you and Marcia and I should find opportunity to go drink a cup of tea or something like that pretty soon.
Or a hard cider. I'm all
hard
in.
cider, or I wasn't going to go there, but if you've got a good single malt scotch, that'd do too. Okay.
And on that note, well, join me next week for Naptime Nutrition. I'm going to do something pre-recorded for next week because it's Rosh Hashanah, and I will be off eating honey cake. And but you won't want to miss it. Something will be posted right here at 1 p.m. Arizona time, which is 4 p.m. East Coast and 1 p.m. West Coast. And I've got some really fun stuff coming up, so you don't want to miss Naptime Nutrition, any of the ones coming up. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.
Bye-bye.